All right, how are you going? I hope you're going well and plodding along and getting through all of the content. We're going to be fine. 165 does have a lot of content, but just keep plugging away bit by bit, and eventually we'll get through it all. Okay, so what I want to do now is finish off topic 8. So this is the last part. And we're going to have a look at what happens at the capillary, which is really important. I think it's the business end of anatomy and physiology, because it is all about cells interacting with their immediate environment and also what's in the blood. So let's have a bit of a think about, what does it mean? What does this word capillary exchange mean? So capillary exchange, I'm just going to highlight it and make sure that so when we think of capillary exchange, is we're looking at the movement between the blood and the interstitial fluid. So if you think about it, okay, what we want to do is we want to move things from here into here. And let me just get my drawing pen so I can just draw it. So if we want to get things like oxygen or glucose or anything really to this particular cell living in this tissue, first of all, we need to move it from there to there. So things need to move from the blood, first of all, into the interstitial fluid. And then from the interstitial fluid, the substance goes from there and then into our cell. So it's kind of a two-step process. So blood is always being pumped around. So that means there's always going to be this interchange between things moving from the blood into the interstitial fluid and then from the interstitial fluid back into our cell. Now things have to go the other way too. So cells deposit things back into the fluid, and then from the interstitial fluid things go back into the blood. So it kind of works both ways. But the interstitial fluid is the middleman between the blood and the cell. Okay, so blood is always there bringing us things we need and taking things away that we don't need. So that's how it kind of all works together. All right. So let's have a look and think about how actually, because if we look at this, this would be our capillary. Okay, this is our capillary. Because our capillary is where this kind of stuff happens. So we are going to have a look at now the different ways that this kind of process can occur. How can we get stuff out from the blood supply into the interstitial fluid? And there's 4 different ways that we can do that. Okay. Remember that before when we were talking about blood vessels, there were kind of 3 different kinds of capillaries? Yeah, so we're just going to stick with this kind of capillary, which is the middle one, like the mediumly permeable one. So let's have a look and see how we can get things from the blood into the interstitial fluid with this kind of capillary. Right. The first way we can do it is to diffuse through the plasma membrane. So can you have a look? Have a look here. When we think about our capillaries are made up of endothelial cells. So what we can do is we can actually diffuse through the plasma membrane of those endothelial cells. And that's how gases are exchanged. That's what oxygen does. That's what carbon dioxide does. The other way that we can get through is through some clefts. So the cleft is the space between each endothelial cell. See? There it is there. There you go, there's a cleft. The other way that we can get through is through pores. Look, see how the endothelial cell has pores or holes in it? So we can get through there as well. And the other way that we can get through this is through endocytosis and exocytosis. Remember that? You have to have a look at those notes and remember what those words mean. Endo and exocytosis. So essentially, you're just grabbing stings from the blood, putting them into a little plasma membrane vesicle and shipping them to the next side, and then we're opening up our plasma membrane vesicle and the stuff spills out. Happy days. So there's a variety of ways that we can get things from here to here. All right, let's have a look and see. All right, so now what we're going to look at is the fact that there are things moving all the time, okay? There are things moving all the time. And there are two words that we need to learn about. The first word is filtration, and the other word is reabsorption, because we'll use those words in a minute. Now, what we want to look at is we're still looking at this kind of interaction, moving from the blood into the interstitial fluid. So we're still looking at that. Now, filtration means that you're moving lots and lots and lots of stuff from the blood to the interstitial fluid. So you're going this way, okay? So that is what the word filtration means. What the word reabsorption means is that you're going the other way, okay? So reabsorption is you're moving lots and lots of stuff from the interstitial fluid back into the blood again. That's all it is. Reabsorption and filtration. So filtration goes this way, reabsorption goes this way. And what you're moving are ions, molecules, lots and lots of different things. Okay, so we're going to look at fluid. Now, when I say the word fluid, I mean plasma, okay? So plasma. So because we know that the blood is made up of plasma and formed elements, we're just looking at the plasma, and that's what I mean when I say fluid. Now, this camera's always focusing and refocusing for some reason. Don't know why that is. Let me just move it. Let's try and fix it. It's been a bit of a pain. Hopefully that'll be better. Okay. So that's what we're looking at. So what we need to think about is what happens at the arterial end versus the venous end. Okay. Now I'm just going to draw this out. This is a pretty good image that kind of summarizes capillary exchange. So we're going to have a look and see what drives filtration and what drives reabsorption. So what I might do is I'm just going to draw a little drawing here, and then I'll restart. Okay, I've just drawn this little picture here, so just to illustrate what I mean, okay? So your heart is the pump, and it's going to move the blood. So it's going to keep pushing the blood this way. Now, as you can see here, here is my capillary. Here is my heart, it's the pump. When you think of capillaries, when you go from one end to the other end, they kind of behave like a hose, okay? You know those soaker hoses that have holes in them? When you turn on the water at one end of the hose, you know, when you look at the water, it kind of, the hose gets longer and longer and further away from the tap, the water pressure reduces. So that's what happens. That's exactly what happens at the capillary. You've got the heart here, which is like the tap, and it's going to have the highest hydrostatic pressure towards the heart, and it's going to get lower and lower and lower as you move further away from the heart. So that is one pressure that we have to think about, and that's called the blood hydrostatic pressure. So when you look at it here in this picture, as you move further away from the heart, the blood pressure or blood hydrostatic pressure just tends to decrease as you go lower and lower. So that's one pressure that we need to think about. I'm going to put in now another element that we need to think about with regards to pressure. So the first pressure is the blood hydrostatic pressure, and look what it does over time. So we looked at this particular force. So this force of the blood hydrostatic pressure is forcing fluid from the capillary into the interstitial space. Okay, so that is forcing the fluid out. But we also have another force that sucks fluid back into the capillary. And this is because in the capillary, we actually have lots and lots of protein. In the blood, we have lots of proteins, and that sucks fluid back in due to osmosis. But that force is equal all the way along the capillary. So what happens when we add these two forces together? When we add these two forces together, you can see that at the arterial end, so this is what happens at the artery end, the net result is that fluid moves from the capillary into the interstitial space. At the venous end, the opposite is true. Whoop, I should have done this like this. At the venous end, the opposite is true. We suck the fluid back in overall, okay? So, if we have a look at this picture again, here fluid moves out. At some point, an equal amount of fluid moves in and out. And then at the venous end, fluid comes back in. So that's what I wanted to teach you with these kinds of drawings. So hopefully they kind of help. All right. If we have a look at this picture, it tells you the same thing. Fluid at the arterial end, fluid moves out of the capillary into the interstitial space. Somewhere along the middle, it's equal, and then at the venous end, we suck fluid back in. Now, what you need to understand that not all the fluid gets sucked back in. Some of it goes into the capillary, and some of it goes into the lymphatic system, which eventually ends up in a vein anyway. Okay? So that's what I wanted to make sure you understand, and make sure I'll pause the recording here to make sure you really get that before we move on to the next bit.